facing the industry today has been a lot of confusion between the services being offered and the value being promoted. As you can see here, when you're looking at organizations trying to gain a significant amount of business value over a longer period of time, they typically tend to go for business models where they retain some level of control. The issue is not as much about services as it is about sharing the risks. When they are simple services, simple solutions, the ability of an organization to invest time and money is considered to be best invested elsewhere, and therefore you find a lot of low-end, low-hanging fruit, if you like, being outsourced to third-party organizations. So that's typically a vendor landscape who offers simple services that are either rule-based or are built around very tight, rigid contracts for a small period of time, maybe a year, 2 years, etc. As the world gets more complex and as organizations look to working with a multiple set of functions, cutting across technologies and processes, bulk of those businesses tend to get into models that are usually handled by the group themselves. Interestingly, in the last 3 years, there has been a significant shakeup, not necessarily because of the economic crisis, but because of the failure of outsourcing to deliver the value that was necessarily promised. So you're finding a convergence right now amongst models, what is being called global business services. So as you look at client organizations who have already matured themselves in buying services, you would find that they are trying to integrate their variety of models, whether they are shared services or third party. They're trying to look at a way you can integrate the services, get companies to work with each other, and kind of pursue the business value that is typically sitting in the top line environment, not necessarily aligned towards costs alone. Can we move to the next slide, please?
Yes.
In this context, it's also important to really put in perspective what is the size of the industry. All of us talk a lot about it being a $1 trillion industry, $2 trillion industry. But what are those services that are constituting this growth? While the economic crisis did put a dampener on the spirits of most companies, the sourcing industry actually bounced back. Although the growth has now come down to an approximate 5% year-on-year worldwide, you would still find that predominantly North America still contributes to more than 40% of the opportunity, with Europe and Asia Pacific and Japan following close by. What you are also seeing is a significant shift in the kind of services that were being outsourced. Starting with IT and application maintenance, development, support, through to enterprise applications. A lot of outsourcing has been undertaken in the context of business functions, predominantly across horizontals like CRM, finance and accounting, human resources functions. But you're also beginning to see emphasis on professional services. And I think it's important for Europe particularly because there is a significant push for professional services around legal and procurement-related businesses opportunities to be had from Eastern European companies. Next slide, please.
It's again overview of the GS industry, but we have another.
Yeah, ITO, BPO, and KPO.
Overview of the ITO. Okay, here we are.
Yeah. What you find with this particular slide is to give you an idea of how the industry has been split across the 3 broad functions. We call them ITO, BPO, and KPO, but that is not as much an issue as it is to do with the fact that the growth is happening in knowledge services. Whether they are forming part of outsourcing or forming part of shared services, the business model is not as important as the need for analytics and decision-making related services. So my point is, while there are traditional services that are still there to be had, whether in the technology side or business side, the absence of analytical components into services is the decision maker between whether you would win businesses or you would not win businesses. So if you're service providers, it becomes significantly important that you incorporate analytics and decision-making capabilities into the services that you offer. Next slide, please.
Slide 8.
That's right.
Okay, here we are.
Having talked about ITO and BPO and KPO, what I would like to call your attention to is something that is not talked about too much in the industry. If you look at the left-hand side of the slide to the bottom, you would find something called ER&D. That's the engineering, research, and development opportunity. What you're finding is that there is a $1.5 trillion opportunity exclusively in engineering-related services alone. The entire marketplace of ITO, BPO, KPO is approximately $2 trillion. But on top of that, what you have is $1.5 trillion worth of an engineering opportunity. Now, if you're looking at value creation and top-line value creation, sustainable businesses, long-term relationships with clients, it is not as much in the commoditized nature of IT and BPO as it is in the non-commoditized nature of engineering services. Having said that, it is a very complicated model. What it expects companies to bring to the table is an understanding of specific industries. For example, if you went to an organization like Anglo-Dutch Shell, and you could go and offer IT services in maintaining their applications, which can be done by anybody around the world. But if you were to look at upstream oil and gas refinery maintenance, you will necessarily need to understand engineering. You will also need to understand oil and gas competencies. But the opportunity out there is not only immense, they usually lend themselves to 5 to 7 year contractual terms with higher price points. So that's where most of the industry is moving towards, a convergence on the technology and BPO side with a preponderance of opportunities in the more complex field of play within engineering, research and development, analytics, etc. Move to the next slide, please.
Slide 9.
Slide 9. However, one of my experiences has been in the last 20 years of working across all the continents is that most service providers tend to assume that each buyer has a similar behavior. We don't necessarily appreciate as much the complexity of the industries within their own regions. Whether it is a result of the economic crisis, whether it's a result of competitive factors at play within a certain region, behavior of buyers has become significantly distinct. For example, if you are looking at offering services to companies in Europe, the primary focus for them is not in standardization as much as it is in analytics, in re-engineering. It's in allowing them to enhance their revenue and growth. So if you're offering standard services around contact centers or application maintenance and support, you would find it difficult to actually sustain the client's interest. However, if you were to look at expanding your opportunities into Africa or into Asia Pac, the opportunity there is very much still stuck at the bottom line. So the point with this slide is before you embark on a journey of really knocking on clients' doors and offering them a certain value that you think you can deliver, it is crucial to appreciate where they are in the buying maturity. Are they at the beginning of their buying where they're looking to standardize and really bring in operational efficiencies? Or are they really at the cutting edge of their own industry trying to create growth and competitiveness? The disconnect between these two arguments is what has led to a significant amount of disappointment with outsourcing. So I would definitely encourage service providers in this room to really understand the behavior of buyers and not really assume that they're all the same. And for the end users out here who are looking to adopt outsourcing more aggressively, I would definitely encourage you to consider not just options around operational efficiencies, but around how do you best leverage external competencies to create a top-line value, which is either manifested in your capital expenditure goals or in terms of your revenue growth goals. Next slide, please.
Slide 9.
Slide 10, please.
10, sorry. Beg your pardon.
Yeah. Now, coming back to the conversation around value versus costs, what we have also seen is preponderance of global business service models. So if you were to go after the top 3,000 companies in the world, all the billion-dollar companies, if you went with a certain model, more often than not, you would end up being disappointed. Primarily because they have already undertaken a significant amount of outsourcing. They have undertaken a significant amount of global expansion in setting up centers worldwide. And what they are now looking to do is to integrate this global footprint. And the challenges that they are facing with integration is that the external marketplace is unwilling to take on a lot of the business risk that the clients want them to. So most of the organizations that we are advising and we are also talking to have expressed their desire to actually pull back on quite a few of their initiatives to do with outsourcing and reintegrate them back into the organization. This does not mean that the opportunity is reducing. What it means is the opportunity is getting more complicated. What it also means is that opportunity is moving away from straight line linear models to more complicated nonlinear models. And I will explain in a bit what the differences are between these two. Next slide, please.
11.
That's right. The primary reason why all of these changes are happening is nothing to do with the maturity of the marketplace. It has all to do with a lot of convergence that is happening. And I'm sure you will all agree with me that today, as you're sitting in the room, I'm sure you're tweeting about the conference, you're blogging about it, you are having a constant communication with your own organization, and you're trying to also excuse me, learn during the process. There is a lot of multitasking happening. Likewise, you're finding organizations having to deal with markets and customers in a multifaceted way. So a single linear approach towards offering a value is just not working enough. And you're finding that most organizations are going towards an integrated value proposition where the convergence between technology, business functions, platforms, and channels has become imminent. You're also finding a preponderance of questions around shifting capex to opex. And I'm sure as you're sitting in this conference, you've already heard people speak about cloud compute.
Sorry. Is there a... We have a connection problem. Είναι και ο ήχος ή είναι μόνο και... Ωραία. Αυτά. Τόση ώρα δεν είχαμε θέμα, τώρα. Έχουμε κάνει 3 πρόβες. Δεν πειράζει. Μέρφη. Ελπίζω να δεν θα το έχει πάρει και είδηση και δεν θα ξέρει που έχουμε σταματήσει. Bobby? Do you hear me? Bobby? Bobby? Do you hear me?
Hello?
Hello, Bobby. The line went off.
Sorry about that.
Yes, it was... I think you were talking about business consulting.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah,
Okay,
yes.
I will just continue. So in terms of the convergence, the issue has come to a point where companies are asking not just for discrete services, but a significant amount of solutions that you will need to really construct that have a bearing on their growth and resilience. So you will have to bring in, you'll have to bundle services and solutions. And I think, and that's becoming a significant challenge for most organizations. So
Again. Bobby, we have a problem with the sound. That's a pity.
Hello?
Hello.
Yeah.
We are listening to you now.
Okay, wonderful.
Okay, you know where the line was cut, at which
Okay,
point? Okay.
no problems. I know it. So, yeah, moving on, I think primarily that's for you to appreciate that the outsourcing industry is not just about offering services, it is bringing solutions to the table. And what are the kind of solutions you will need to construct are going to be a function of not just one element, which could either be people, process, or technology, but a combination of all the three. So that is principally a very summary version of what is happening in the marketplace today. But what I would like to spend some time on is to really talk about the opportunity that is available for Greece and for companies like yourselves. Can we move on to the next slide, please?
Yes, slide 12.
Slide 12, the BPO model.
The BPO model. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, 13 it's then.
Right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this slide gives you a brief overview of how the BPO industry has really moved from traditional resource provisioning to today's bundled solutioning endeavors where technology, people, competencies, platforms, and channels have come to play. One of the things to appreciate is what is today widely known as platform-based business services. What it essentially means is that a lot of the services that companies have really sold to have been incorporated into technology platforms. So clients are unwilling to pay for transactions, for example. They are only willing to pay for the outcome of a transaction. So that is how far the business process industry has come from its first phase of innovation to its second phase of innovation. Of course, the slide actually allows all of you in the BPO marketplace to really put yourself into this and say what kind of services are you offering and where are you in this value play. And if you are in the first phase, then I think it is going to be a big struggle to continue to remain as a value provider. You will have to quickly find ways and means to move to the right of the slide to remain compelling and relevant. Next slide, please. However,
yes, I'm building it. Traditional, modern, and future.
Yes, can you go to the next slide, please?
You want
yes,
me to
that's
go?
right. That's right. Traditional,
Okay.
modern, and future. Perfect. All right, thank you. Let me, these two slides, I'm going to really talk to you about the problems clients face. And these are manifestation of issues over the last 20 years of clients being engaged with the marketplace. If you are an IT service provider, the way you look at an organization, this is how it looks like to you. If you're offering technology services, you are either in the traditional model, you're offering typical hardware support, desktop maintenance, those kind of services, or you're offering services that are slightly more comprehensive, like infrastructure services around storage, application monitoring, or you're doing enterprise applications, implementation, support, etc. And if you're a lot more modern a technology organization, you are looking at end-user computing, utility-based, grid computing, etc. Whatever you're offering, wherever you find yourself in this chain, one of the biggest challenges has been that this is how you view a client as well. So when you're walking into an organization, for example, a bank, you are trying to put the bank into this model and looking at the bank's technology footprint. What you are not probably seeing is what does this mean for a bank? Or if you're walking into a government organization and you're trying to look at the government's technology footprint as one of these three, you're still looking at the technology but not the utility value of technology. And that remains a challenge for a lot of companies. When you walk to a bank, the banks expect service providers to speak the language of banking. But as a technology provider, you are more comfortable and conditioned to speak the language of technology. And that disconnect leads to a lack of trust in being able to work with you as a service provider. Moving to the next slide, please, Despina.
Yes.
Now, a similar problem exists in the business side of things. If you're a BPO provider, you're in the contact center space, you are in the transaction processing space, when you walk into a client organization, again, the way you are looking at an organization is very much stuck in the process mold, not as much in the vertical mold or in the vertical centric horizontals. This slide can be a little complicated, but to put it very simply, the bottom blue lines are where a lot of BPO players are playing. They offer services around HR or F&A or procurement or sales. But what the clients are looking for is up there in the vertical specificity. And I think this gap is what is creating a lot of problems for buyers in being reluctant in purchasing services. While you can always argue that whether it's the technology side or the process side, it's a function of maturity of clients and vendors together. The issue remains that the disruption is occurring from a bunch of companies who have basically gone around the world in the last 2 years telling that outsourcing is dead. And I'm sure you heard a lot of conversations around outsourcing being dead. A lot of people coming and telling that cloud computing is going to replace outsourcing, big data is going to replace all forms and manners of BPO businesses. To a certain extent, what they are offering to clients is a replacement model. And for us in the outsourcing space, it seems to be a threat coming in from someplace else that we are neither ready for and nor are we willing to really appreciate it perhaps. Next slide, please.
Yes, demanding grounded capabilities.
Capabilities. Putting aside the arguments around death of outsourcing or its transformation of outsourcing, what is important to appreciate, as a buyer, they look for a set of rounded capabilities. For a vendor, they will have to display competencies across all the 5 layers at the operating model, the organizational level, process models, people models, tools and technologies and architecture. And more importantly, how are they putting it together? More often than not, if, for example, you're a service provider and you have recently not been awarded a deal, you may want to go back to one of these 5 elements, and perhaps one of these 5 elements you are probably seen as not being good enough by the client. And I think it's important to undertake a merciless and comprehensive review of your own service offerings and your organization in this context and say, are your capabilities strongly founded on foundations that are unshakable, or is there some work to be done? Because the disruptive technology people are coming in one of these areas, one or more of these areas, and actually trying to replace service providers. The argument is faulty. It is most often than not invalid. But in the absence of any other proof, it seems to remain that outsourcing is dying. The traditional outsourcing is dying an unnatural death. Next slide, please.
Yes.
So
alignment of models.
That's precisely. So what it means is, my dear ladies and gentlemen, before we start walking into client organizations and offering certain services on a certain model, it's important to appreciate the client's risk appetite and what model lends to what value. For example, if you looked at standard contact centers, campaign management, etc., they're highly commoditized, and expecting them to go into a 3-year deal is just not going to happen. Clients would pay on delivery, and they don't want to be tied to a 3-year contract for standard contact center inbounds or outbound campaigns. But if you're looking at bundling and offering an entire end-to-end customer relationship management service, which includes platforms, technologies, etc., then what you have is a long-term value play. So I think it's important to appreciate business models have their own influence on value creation and risk reduction. So if not anything else, you need to take a merciless review of your organization from a value creation standpoint and a risk reduction standpoint. Next slide, please.
Needing ability to deal with disruptions.
That's right. You need to click a few times.
Yes, that's what I'm doing.
Okay.
Okay.
Now,
It's full.
my friends, I know a lot of you in the technology world would definitely want to shoot me right now when I say that disruption is not because of the technology itself or the new things that we are seeing in the past 2 years around big data, Internet of Things, or cloud computing. It is in the way in which these technologies are changing the structure and exposure of an organization. If you look at the left side, devices or access points, access authorizations, vulnerabilities, and compliance-related issues, when we are moving into the new world of technology, which is open-ended, neural, public, and uncontrolled, the challenges are with the fact that what do you do with the risk that is completely coming from outside of your organization? In the previous years, when we had point-to-point LANs or standard controls within a certain business environment, they were all easily within the control of an organization, whether they were done by the client or outsourced to the vendor. And so the disruption was not as much the organization's existence itself. But today, bulk of the disruption is because of the externalization of the problems coming from these disruptive technologies. So my point is, it's not the technologies that are disruptive, it is what disruption they're causing to businesses. So for us as service providers, I think we need to be very conscious that when we are going to an organization and offering a certain value proposition, are we adding to their risk or are we helping them reduce the risk? That is the only difference between succeeding to gain a deal or failing to win a client. Next slide, please.
Yes, I need to fill it in.
Yes, please.
Yes.
Well, my friends, actually, I have a lot of slides here, and of course, I will not talk through all of them, but if you don't remember anything of my presentation, not a problem, just take this one slide home. This is probably the most important slide, which reflects upon the provisioning marketplace, how the service provider landscape is around the world. From the left to the right, you would find that companies are offering simple services to very complex services, or they're offering services that either impact some little bottom line element or are actually helping create top line value in revenue and growth. So which step are you in as a service provider? Are you a linear, discrete service provider? Are you in the step 2 where you're offering continuous services? Or are you an organization that offers integrated services, or you're offering non-linear based models where you're bundling in a lot of solutions and products and technologies? I submit to you that the step 1 is a dead model. So for example, if any of you as a vendor find yourself to be a part of step 1, I think you have probably less than 6 months to move to the next step. You will have to really make those changes to your organization, invest in the right kind of transformation to be able to move to step 2 and beyond. There is no opportunity for discrete services any longer. In fact, even companies who are in the continuous model, that is step 2, are struggling to really retain deals. Most deals that are being renegotiated as we speak, approximately $300 billion of deals are being renegotiated worldwide. Those are all because vendors are unable to reflect a maturity from step 2 to step 3. And clients are getting disappointed, and therefore they are rescinding the contracts, they're moving back to larger vendors, or they're consolidating operations and creating global business service models. So that is the reality of the marketplace. So if you forget everything else that I talked to you about, I shared with you, this is one slide I would definitely urge you all to look at and position yourselves and see how you can move toward the right of the equation. Because that is where the value is, that is where the continuity is. And I think that is where the battles with disruptive technologies do not exist any longer. You're no more fighting a battle for relevance. You're only fighting a battle for mind share and market share. So can we move on to the next slide, please?
Yes. It's emphasizing economic value creation.
Yeah, if you can you can skip this slide. It's primarily about cost savings, etc.
Through equal emphasis on 3 Cs?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, I'm filling it in.
Perfect.
Okay, it's full.
So in order to be able to move from step 1 to step 3 and step 4, what I think all service providers will have to do is to not just look at provisioning a service where cost is considered to be king, but to provision a solution which reflects that your organization can, at optimal costs, bring in sizable amount of capabilities and capacity to deal with the risks and dynamism in client organizations. The compounding effect is most important today. So as a vendor, if you're not in the right side of the equation, then you are quickly deteriorating yourself into being a componentized, compartmentalized organization where deals will become few and far in between. And for buyers, for buyers of services, I think it's also important for you to demand equal emphasis on all the 3 C's and not just push the vendor into the corner asking only for cost savings, because pure focus on cost without capability and capacity only results in a ballooning cost and reduced capacity. So I think it's also important to understand that if you're only asking for costs, you're only going to get so much, after which the entire equation will come back to bite you. Next slide, please.
Yes, and adopting a
Therefore,
Yes.
Yes. So this is one of my last slides, which basically sets up a roadmap on how you can move from step 1 to step 4. I won't bore you with the details, ladies and gentlemen, but what it reflects is that there's a staged manner in which you can move. Of course, you could also leapfrog from one to the other. However, staying in the top left corner of the equation is a sure sign of what I would call obsolescence and demise as service providers. And in our experience in working with a lot of companies from emerging markets across Africa and Eastern Europe and Latin America and Asia Pacific, what we have found is most of the organizations are in the top left corner. And I think that is probably one of the biggest reasons why you're finding it a big struggle to remain as compelling value providers and even make a competitive dent. And you almost always end up being compared with countries all over the planet. So I think when I'm sure none of you would like it when somebody says Greece and Nigeria and Ghana are all the same. But at the current moment, that's what the perception is. And I think it is not because of your marketing ability, it is because of mostly where your businesses are in terms of what they're offering. So I think it's important to get out of being compared like that, but it's important to get into this kind of a value model. But I want to spend a few minutes on a very different facet that has come to play. The next slide, please.
Focus on spectrum and vulnerability.
That's right. I will move to a different phase of the industry, which I'm sure you all heard, if you're not seen yet. It's something called impact sourcing. And I think particularly for Greece and for many other countries who have really faced a lot of problems during the economic crisis, I think you would have found a lot of problems, and I think you're continuing to face some of those challenges with employment, with lack of employment amongst people, with a lot of social problems being caused. I think vulnerability has increased in the country, and I'm sure it has increased in quite a few parts of the world. But outsourcing has actually come to be a savior for most vulnerable locations by actually creating jobs for people who are in the vulnerable sectors, whether they are people who have been laid off from jobs, whether they have been forced out of jobs, or they have dropped out from jobs, or they are considered to be unemployable. And I think in most countries, unemployability is a big worry. Whatever be those concerns, and I'm sure in Greece too, there are similar issues, sourcing has the ability to really make those changes happen and actually create jobs. Can we move to the next slide, please?
Yes.
What it requires is for companies, service providers like yourselves, to really understand and appreciate that you need to take jobs to where the people are, where the vulnerable people are, and not actually move vulnerable people into the cities. So there are many opportunities that can be created, but one of the primary things to do is to look at every person as possibly employable, subject to being trained upon a certain set of skills that he or she can quickly put to use. The biggest successful examples of this model have been in India and in South Africa. So if you ever get an opportunity to visit India or talk to some of the impact sourcing service providers, you would find there's a huge room to create jobs by using outsourcing models. And I think it creates two different values. If you can move to the next slide, please.
Yes. Emphasizing impact and sustained value.
That's right. What it creates is direct impacts in terms of actually adding to the job pool and economic impact, because when a person has a job, then he also becomes an automatic consumer of goods and services. So you're bringing back, and I understand Greece has a significant level of unemployment at this current moment. And I think as conscientious leaders who are looking at growing the Greek economy, you have a huge opportunity to create impact sourcing models and actually take those jobs. The indirect impact is substantial. For example, in India, for every job that has been created in a small poor village, it has resulted in reduction of poverty by about 900%. So people who were considered to be living below the poverty line are actually living now in middle income households. And it took companies less than a year to make the transformation happen. So I think there are successful examples out there that you can adopt. So this is my last slide. Can you move to the next slide, please?
Yes.
Not my book, the next one, please.
Greater details available here.
Yeah,
Humanomics.
you
Yes,
can
yes.
read my book.
In summary,
yes, please.
the summary,
summary
slide. Yes. Okay, here
so,
we are.
Great. So in summary, ladies and gentlemen, what I have is a few recommendations, typically summarizing what we spoke about. I think you will have to start looking at business models from the top, championing them as a function of value and risk, not necessarily of pushing in a service that somebody might or might not need. Very, very crucial to undertake real review from the top. The second important thing to do is to really look at a single value initiative. Whatever be the service, I think more often than not, I have seen service providers talk about SLAs, how great they are at SLAs. SLA is not the goal. SLA is the route to the goal. The goal could be about saving costs. It could be about increasing efficiencies. It could be about enhancing revenues. It could be about growth. I think it's important to really focus on what is the value for the client. It's not the how, but it is the what that is important to get you. And I think as you go around Europe looking for clients, as you move to North America looking for clients, this argument applies everywhere. And like I alluded to at the beginning of my discussion, analytics is important. There is a lot of data you're sitting on. And clients are looking not just for a job to be done, they're looking for insights. They're looking for help because they are not sure what they want to do in the next 2 to 3 years. They are seeking assistance from a point of view of intelligence and mindshare. And building an analytics culture in an organization helps in actually taking that value to the table to the clients. When I say hire the right people, I definitely want to pass on the idea that at the current moment, employability is a big issue. A lot of us are in a hurry to employ people to quickly generate revenues from them. But I think it's important to invest in the right people. Invest in people and invest in training. But please remember that there are ready-to-deploy skills today do not exist any longer. Those days are gone. So almost everywhere on the planet, unemployability is on the rise because the pace of change in organizations is so far ahead that the pace of education is not catching up. So whenever an individual is coming out of college, he or she is considered to be almost illiterate and unemployable by most of us employers. And I think we have to invest in their learning because they are coming from education systems that are still sitting in the 1960s and 70s, whereas our businesses have moved so far ahead so quickly. However, it's important to realize that there are external problems. Security is a big issue, and I'm not suggesting that you just think of an information security policy and forget it. Security is an ongoing endeavor. It is not a departmental issue, it's an organizational issue. Compliance And you are a part of Europe, so you understand compliance the best. And I think EU probably has the most widest range of compliance requirements. And I'm sure all of you are already subject to a lot of those compliance-related issues. But the problem with compliance is not in just adhering to those rules, but in the ambiguity it presents. There is no sure shot guarantee that a certain regulation will remain in effect for the next 5 years. So you're not sure about the kind of investments you'll have to make because of ambiguity. And I think understanding new technology trends, understanding clients' environments allows you to at least get better at handling ambiguity with respect to compliance. And most crucially, I would suggest that you will have to understand external issues. You cannot really focus on just a function and saying that you are good at it. You will have to really go beyond the functional value and really look at what the clients are getting out of it. So the disruption is coming in from outside. It's coming in from different quarters. And instead of pushing back on disruption, I would rather encourage you to embrace disruption and really look at institutionalizing that disruptions into your own business offerings. And I think that's the only way you can compete in your own domestic market, and only way you can compete globally as well. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I've come to an end of my discussion, maybe slightly longer. My apologies. But if there are any questions,
Are there any questions? Έχουμε ερωτήσεις? Θα τις μεταφέρω εγώ στο Bobby. Bobby, you were so explicit. There are no questions. I think that we all need to study your presentation more carefully because this was a brilliant presentation. Thank you so much. And we were hearing you as if you were in the room. I do promise that next time I will invite you earlier and you have ample time to issue a visa. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you as well, everyone, for your patience. And if nobody has slept through the presentation, at least I've done my job. But please feel free to email me or call me with any questions you may have. And we can connect on LinkedIn and everything else. But thank you again for your patience. And thanks to the organizers and Despina for inviting me. Have a great
Thank you,
rest of the
Bobby.
day.
I will be getting back to you afterwards. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Ευχαριστούμε πολύ τον Bobby Varanasi.